unique, especially for where I lived. The most common word that the teacher used was patinar, to ice skate. We lived in the middle of the desert. No one ice skated. The water never froze. We didn't have ice hockey teams. It was such a weird, odd word for the teacher to, why is she teaching us this word? Now I know that she was teaching us this word because it's regular, like it behaves regularly. But this is a word I would never encounter if I was in Mexico, if I was speaking with Spanish speakers around in my area. So I moved to Mexico and I started to become interested in Spanish and in teaching Spanish and learning Spanish. So I was introduced to this idea of huge collections of language stored in searchable databases. In this case, I was interested in Spanish, and I found an amazing resource based on multinational collection of texts, billions of words in Spanish. And so this book, A Frequency Dictionary of Spanish, gives the most frequent 5,000 words in the language. And I was interested to see if Spanish language textbooks, like the textbooks that people were using to teach Spanish, used the most frequent words. And what I found was a lot of textbooks didn't teach the most frequent words. In fact, one of the top 10 most frequent verbs in Spanish is to give. Dar is the word in Spanish, to give. And they didn't even teach that in this book. They didn't include it in the book. They included the word to gift, but not to give. And so that really made me interested in materials development, and not just in Spanish, but also in English. So let's get back to English. So to give you some background, and what some researchers have found is that a very small number of words make up most of what we encounter in our daily lives. In fact, only about 2,000 words, depending on the context, make up between 70 to 95% of any kind of source text that we encounter. So for example, in a conversation, the 2,000 most frequent words almost account for every type of word that you would find. For a learner, for an English learner to be considered high intermediate, they should know between 5,000 and 6,000 words. But we also need to consider that high frequency words often have many different meanings. So it's not just a matter of learning more words, but we also need to learn how these words are used. So to give you an overview of this quick presentation, I'll talk about what corpus linguistics is, and I'll talk about dictionaries, frequency lists, and data-driven learning. In particular, for this talk, I'm going to be talking about vocabulary. So first, let's talk about corpus linguistics. So it's a fancy term, but it's simply the study of language based on vast collections of real-world texts known as corpora. These corpora may contain millions of words from thousands of texts, ranging from sources like books, articles, websites, even social media. Corpus linguistics lets us analyze language patterns, frequencies, and usage in a data-driven and evidence-based way. We're not just relying on our own intuitions to guess how language behaves. And so we can use corpora to inform our language teaching. So in terms of grammar, instead of relying solely on grammar rules, we can show students the actual usage of certain structures, helping them understand when and how to use them correctly. We can use corpora to help us choose relevant audio materials and authentic dialogues for listening practice, making it easier for them to understand real conversations. We can guide students in producing more natural and authentic text by showing them examples from corpora and discussing style, register, and tone. Today, I'm going to be talking about the ways that we can incorporate corpus linguistics into our teaching to help our students learn vocabulary. Corpus-informed language teaching gives us the power to provide our students with more authentic, varied, and effective language learning experiences. By incorporating real-world language data into our teaching, we can help our students become more proficient and confident as English users, whether they're speaking or writing. So I wanted to start with dictionaries. When we think of learning new words, dictionaries are frequently our go-to resources as teachers. In this segment, I'm going to discuss how dictionaries that have been constructed and tailored using corpus linguistics work, and I'll explore how educators can employ them. So there are two dictionary families that are particularly like for this purpose. The co-build dictionaries and materials are all based on a large corpus that's made of a wide variety of situational contexts, including different registers and dialects, based on a 20 billion word corpus sourced from all these different registers. The Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English is also based on a large corpus, but it's less pedagogically realized ecosystem of materials. Like they don't have textbooks associated with it. Over the years, it started as a book. I used it more for its website. And very recently, like just in the last few months, Longman has stopped supporting the website and now directs users to the mobile app. While the app is easy to access on somebody's smartphone, it offers a small fraction of the information that the website does. So I recommend that folks visit the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English website when this talk is done. So I have a link up here. Basically, if you searched for Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English website, you would find it. So this is the URL. One thing to realize, it's free, but like a lot of free things, it has advertisements on it. So some advantages for using dictionaries that are based on corpora is that they use real world language use. You can see different collocations and idioms. How are these expressions used in natural fluent language use? Corpus-based dictionaries also are able to provide how frequent an entry is. I know that when I was learning Spanish and I was looking up words in Spanish, I never knew if a word I was looking at was very common or if it was sort of like specific, or maybe if it was regionally specific. A corpus-based dictionary also gives contextual examples. They will provide real examples from when the word is used, and will give you different word senses of the definition. A lot of corpus-based dictionaries are very updated. They'll focus on how the word is currently used and not necessarily historically. And using a corpus-based dictionary also encourages learners to think critically about language. They can explore multiple examples and contexts, which promotes a deeper understanding of words and their usage. So I wanted to show an easy example. So this is we're going to look up the word crumpet. So this is a word that in the Longman Online Dictionary looks like this. So here's the entry for crumpet. You'll notice that for this dictionary, it uses only the 2,000 most common English words to create their definition. So for learners, it can be really a good source because the definitions themselves aren't complicated. You can also play recordings. There's over 90,000 example sentences pronounced by British and American native speakers of English. In this entry, we can see the pronunciation in the International Phonetic Alphabet. You can also click on to hear the recordings. This includes the dialect that this word is used for. So this is a word that's common in British English. I would never say this word as an American unless I'm talking about British things. I love that this dictionary uses so many hyperlinks to other words. It's visually quite appealing and easy to use. So like you could click on bread or holes or butter. It also includes corpus excerpts, examples from the corpus. So that was an easy word. That would be an easy word to teach. You're all English teachers, so I'm sure you've used and have taught this word. This is a much more complicated word, is the word just. So I'm going to show you how this dictionary uses just. Compared to crumpet, it's so much more frequent. So you can see the pronunciation in the just is usually as a function word, so it is unstressed. It has that schwa. This is also in the dictionary. It lists the top. These dots show that it's one of the most frequent words. It's in this top category of most frequent in spoken and written English. The most frequent use of the word just is a synonym of exactly. And then they give all these recordings, and a user can click on to hear all of these recordings. It also includes the that in British English they would say just on, like that's not possible in American English. The next most common meaning is only, and then they give some examples. They also point out that in this register box, it tells the user that even though just has the same meaning as simply, when in formal settings, people tend to prefer the latter. So it also sort of clearly shows that even though they mean the same thing, depending on the formality of the context, one would be preferred over the other. And then there gives more entries. Recently, something happening now, to emphasize something, soon, something that came close to not happening. And then they give a whole bunch of different phrases that just is used in. And then even more phrases. For this versatile adverb, the dictionary tells us information about how it behaves grammatically, indicating how it's positioned in sentences. For example, in this, it describes how just comes before a main verb, like I just saw him means that you saw. If you said I saw just him, it would mean you saw only him. But usually you're going to want to say I just saw him to mean recently. She is just 17 if it's the verb to be. And then it would come after the first auxiliary verb. I have just seen him. And then it tells you don't say I just have seen him. So I like this kind of dictionary because it sort of overtly shows the use. Just also has another meaning in English. And so it can also be an adjective, like to be fair and just is an adjective. Notice that it's less frequent. It has one fewer dot than the other just. Let's see. Okay. So that dictionaries are one thing. Now I'm going to talk about frequency lists. This is what got me interested in corpus linguistics in the first place. And so someone learning English in the US, they probably don't need to learn crumpet because it's not something they're going to encounter. For somebody learning Spanish in the desert, they probably don't need to learn ice skating because it's not something they're going to encounter. So let's talk about frequency. So there's a long history of frequency lists. You might be familiar with the general service list. It's the top 2,000 most frequent words in English, but it's based on almost 100 years old data. There's been an update in the last 10 years. There's also other lists such as the academic word list or academic vocabulary list. There are all kinds of word lists that are based on corpora that are more typically encountered by students. So some issues and solutions. One issue is that in second language acquisition, researchers have found that 95 to 98% of the words in a text have to be understood by a learner for that learner to fully understand the text. And so that can be hard if the text has a lot of words that the learner doesn't know, right? Then it's hard to make reading useful. So when examining the input that students receive, these lists did not cover that much of the target text for learners. And this trend from lists covering what learners are exposed to has been shown to be growing. Like that there has become a difference, more of a difference between what learners are expected and these original old lists. So some potential solutions would be regularly updating these existing lists to reflect new words and the kind of words that people encounter, or even making specialized lists, lists that are created by teachers or researchers in specific contexts. So I have this QR code to a great article. It's free, it's open access, on using word lists. And some of the things that they describe is how word lists are important. So if a learner has limited exposure to English outside of the classroom, then it's intentional word focused activities should be used to complement contextual vocabulary learning. Learning a list or learning through lists in particular can be beneficial for lower level second language learners and prove to be an efficient way to achieve vocabulary mastery. So in this article, there are a lot of citation and links to commonly used word lists. Some of them might be more appropriate for you and your context. So I recommend sort of checking this out. Let's see. Another thing with word lists to recognize is you might not want to just give all of the words to your learners at once. Instead, you can focus on which words do your students already know and then work backwards. Another thing to consider when you're using word lists is that highly frequent words have many meanings. So it might be helpful for your learners to learn how a really frequent word like just can have very different meanings. And then as teachers, you can work the way you always have with vocabulary by doing things like highlighting and bolding to emphasize the target vocabulary. I wanted to talk about this English version, American English version of the Spanish book that I talked about earlier. So I scanned a few pages from this book that's based on the huge corpus of English, American English. So it's a frequency dictionary. I really like it. So maybe check it out. I'll just show you what it looks like. So in each of the entries, it doesn't look like other dictionaries. So instead of being alphabetical, the entries are listed by frequency. So you can see that the number one entry in the book is the. So it lists the frequency, the part of speech, the raw frequency, how many words there are in the corpus, but also it gives you an indication of which register the word is most frequent in. And then so a word like have, you'll notice that instead of giving you a definition of have, it tells you what words come near have. So have trouble, had a neck, have qualms, had repercussions. So you get these common collocations. It also has sections on semantic categories. So it lists, for example, this one is animals, the most frequently described animals. Here are some academic examples. So these are words 432, 433, and 434. You'll notice that they all are primarily academic. That's what that A at the end of the entry means. So for effect, so it says, okay, this is a noun, and these are the adjectives that come near effect. So significant effect, main effect, negative effect, positive effect, etc. Contrast that with when effect is combined with nouns, we have an effect size, a sound effect, cause and effect, explore the effect. So you can imagine sort of if you were teaching about like science, that you would have a built-in sort of vocabulary network to focus on. I'm just gonna move on. So other kind of cool grammatical things that the book has is irregular plurals. So what are the most frequent irregular plurals? This entry keeps on going because English has a whole bunch of irregular plurals. Okay. Uh, now I want to talk about how we can compare our data or our students' data or the things students read to those frequencies. So I found this article. It was called What Color is the Sun? Imagine I'm teaching a course on a unit on perception or maybe a unit on astronomy. This article might fit right in. So I copied and pasted the text into a Word document. I cleaned it up because it was just from a website. And let me show you. I'm going to change my screen, new share. Aha. Oh, good. Okay. So I I'm going to go here. Oh no. Technology. Text. Okay, I'm gonna paste it in the text. Oh, here to continue. Yeah, it worked. Okay. Can you all see this? The website? Okay. So note that 60% of the words come from the top 500 most frequent words. Right? Do you see this? 60% come from the most 500 most frequent words, 13 from the next level, and 12 from the next. So these 12% that are less frequent, that's much more than just a small handful. If you remember, learners need to know 95 to 98% of the words. So this text is definitely too difficult for beginning English learners, and probably even too difficult for high intermediate learners. What we might consider doing because of that is to edit this same piece and try to edit the piece in a way that where we make the words uh, frequent to help our students be able to understand them. Or we can use this as an opportunity to create vocabulary lessons for it. And so this is in, if you go to englishcorpora.org, and then I clicked, it's called word and phrase, is this this function here. And so you can enter text that you like. It compares it to the corpus of contemporary American English, and you can click through like I was doing before to sort of understand something like all these yellow ones are probably like this, a black body. And by clicking on the words that maybe you don't know, so for this, the students probably know the word black and the word body, but a black body in astrophysics does not mean like a person who is black. Instead, you can see that all these words are related to astronomy. Yeah. And you can even sort of like see how it's used in these different websites. So I love this tool. Okay. Okay. So the last section that I want to talk about is using Corpora for your students, how your students can use it themselves. This is called data-driven learning. There are lots of benefits to data-driven learning. This is where your students become their own like corpus linguists. Rather than overtly teaching them a rule, you give them enough context for them to discover a rule or discover how a word is used. So I'm going to give you an example. This is from an article by Bolton in 2010. And he was interested in looking at right versus good, home, say versus tell, near, far, and close. And then he gives some example errors that students often make. So the good answer instead of the right answer. What is the good solution? Okay. So I'll show you what this kind of activity looks like. So he was teaching in the French context, and he was trying to get the students to see the difference between right and correct. So in French, la bonne réponse is directly, it's like the good response. But in English, that's what the right response, because in English we have the right hand, but it also can mean correct. And so he had this activity where they looked at in the data the right answer. So if you search for right answer, and students looked up, what do they see on the words to the left of right and good answers? So there is no single right answer, the right answer, the right answer, the right answer, one right answer, a single right answer. You're noticing it's all one thing, right? Yeah, that's a very good answer. A very good answer. A good answer. A good answer. A good answer. A good answer. So it's one, but it's like one of possible, right? So the idea would be that you would get students to see without telling them that, without saying, oh no, it's the right answer, a good answer. Students would sort of like pick that up themselves. So there are some suggestions for teachers when they're doing this, is trying to become familiar with these methods before trying them yourself, trying to incorporate some induction into your regular teaching where possible. So not always just providing the rules to your students, and trying to, if you do want to learn about and incorporate data-driven learning, try it with your higher level courses first. And if you wanted to then add it to your lower level courses, you probably need to set up the activities even more. So to close out, I just want to give you some resources if you're curious about corpus linguistics in the classroom. And so here are some books that I suggest. I highlighted the ones that I really suggest that I think would be particularly useful for teachers. This first one, edited by Viana, is, I think it might be like 100 example like lessons. So each chapter of the book is only like 4 or 5 pages long, and it's only like, oh, I did this lesson, this is how I did it. And so it gives you tons of examples of what you can do. My friend Eric Frihinal has a book called Corpus Linguistics for English Teachers that is similarly, it's geared toward people who are already English teachers and might want to learn how to incorporate corpora into their teaching. Some other websites that are good resources are, I have a link to that dictionary that I showed you earlier. Also a link to english-corpora.org. That was the website where I pasted in for word and info. And then lextutor.ca is a Canadian website that has tons of vocabulary-based language teaching resources. I didn't talk about them, but if you get interested in creating your own corpora, becoming familiar with software like AntConc or Lanxbox, all of these are free, can be really helpful. Finally, some resources on workshops and conferences. So Lancaster University Summer School in Corpus Linguistics is a really extensive, I don't know if every year it's free. It was free this year. I think you just have to travel there. It's taught by some of the best corpus linguists in the world. But if you're not able to go to England, they also offer a massive online open course every year. And so that's a really good way to start learning about corpus linguistics. University of Birmingham also has a summer school. And then in terms of conferences, TALC, the Teaching and Language Corporate Conference, happens every other year. And at TESOL, at applied linguistics conferences, look for corpora and corpus linguistics, and you'll start to go to conference presentations, especially at places like TESOL, where you'll see presentations of teachers using corpora in their classrooms. So just to wrap up, in summary, incorporating corpus linguistic techniques into our language teaching can empower us to provide our students with more authentic, varied, and effective language learning experiences. By incorporating these real-world language data into our teaching, we can help our students become more proficient and confident English speakers and writers. So consider integrating these tools into your teaching approach and watch your students thrive in their English language journey. So here are some, and I know it's being recorded, so here are the references that I used in the talk. Here's some more. Thank you. So let me stop the share and I'm open to questions. Feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Dr. Harvey? Yes, I have to use there's no mic, so I have to use my phone to. Okay.
This is an unrelated. Wait, let me just.
With this. Got this.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that works great.
Okay. This is an unrelated question. I just wanted to ask, do you do any audiobooks? Because you have the voice for it.
Oh, do I?
You do?
No, should I try that?
You should.
I know
You should try it,
I have a
honestly.
very loud voice.
No, it's very clear, and it was like I was paying attention the whole time.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. From here.
Hello there. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
But I have a question. Can students make use of Corpus, and what are your suggestions for them?
Yeah,
Because
so
a long list of reference guides and websites. I need just one recommendation for my students to make use of Corpus to improve their language skills.
Yeah, so my recommendation is, so a lot of people who do this kind of research would tell you like, oh, you can get them to use Corpora. I don't know if it's really realistic. For me, I think that it's better for, if I were a teacher, a language teacher, like, so if I were in your situation, I would almost start with trying to find resources that were made using Corpora first. So it's like trying to find, if I'm going to use a dictionary or if I'm going to use a textbook, to what extent do the materials that I use for my students, are they based on corpus data, or are they just sort of made up by the authors? So that's like the base level. That would be my takeaway for you all, is to try to examine what materials you're using. The second one, if you get into that, the second level would be for you to start playing around with Corpora when you're making your materials. So evaluating the materials that you give your students to read, evaluating your own students' writing. You can look to see how frequent the words that they are using. So it's like, one is using the materials that current corpus linguists use. The next level would be you trying to become a little bit of a corpus linguist yourself. And then once you become comfortable with that, then trying to have your students use Corpora. Does that make sense? It seems it's kind of a lot to have your students use the computer and get used to these ideas that they don't even know how it works. I hope that answers your question. Like, so my recommendation is not to start with you using the corpus. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? Do you mind coming up here? Sorry, we don't have our mics.
The mic is pretty good though. I can hear people from the room.
Hi. Oh, okay. As the corporate is related to authenticity of the text and the context and so on. Yes, can you hear me like this?
A little bit louder.
Okay, I'll try to shout.
Okay.
You mentioned that corporate is related to authenticity and like authentic text and so on. So, like we're teachers, we're tied to textbooks and curriculums that are not authentic all the time. So, what's your like advice for us in this case?
Yeah, so it's similar to the previous question where a lot of times you as teachers don't have choice in what textbooks you use. And so in the areas where you do have choice, maybe you could do like a study like I did with Spanish and take the textbooks that you have to use, put them through to better like use the corpus-based materials to analyze or look at your own textbooks, and where the textbooks falter, maybe supplement the textbooks with that kind of data. So for example, if your textbook never includes some of the most frequent words, if your textbook never includes some of the most frequent words in your class, like in person, you can supplement what your textbook is missing. Or the activities that you do to supplement the activities from the textbook can be improved, or sort of like, I guess it depends on how much freedom you have as a teacher. That I totally understand that some people are told you have to do a certain way. Maybe even if you're thinking, I want my students to be exposed to authentic language, the examples that I give them, if they come from the corpus, I know that somebody actually said or wrote them. And so you can use examples from the corpus directly, or a corpus that you're interested in.
Yeah, just now. Oh, okay. Any more questions for Dr. Hardy?
There's your phone.
It wasn't working.
Oh, it was working?
Yeah, they were coming up here to ask.
Oh, okay,
So
no problem.
would anyone else like to come here and ask your question? Are we done for now? You can always email Dr. Hardy.
Yep.
If you can flash his email here.
Yeah, could you show your email,
Can you
please?
please share your email?
Yeah, I'll put it on share my screen.
By the way, just to introduce, when I wanted to introduce him myself, he's my colleague at Peace International. He's my friend and colleague, so. Yes, Jack.
That might be kind of small. I don't know if you all can see that. It's basically my name, jack.hardy@emory.edu.
So Jack, I was saying, you are my former colleague at CPC.
Yes.
It's a pleasure and honor both to have you
Oh,
here.
thank you.
My greatest wish is to have you in person, Jack, maybe